What's your advice about RESPs and trust accounts when it comes to divorce?
So, again, I don't mean to repeat some of what I've said before, but I think it comes down to, is it a collaborative or acrimonious divorce? So there are some spouses that do a really good job co-parenting post separation or divorce, and they can then strategize on who does it make sense to hold the RSP in? Is it both our names for our children, or is it in one of us? And that comes down to some tax. If one's in a really high tax bracket and there's some concern the child may not go to school, there's some tax issues potentially down the road. And trust accounts, those are informal trusts. They can get a little bit complicated, particularly when it comes to handing that asset over, which you have to at 19. And it's something to think about, because if you're in a very traumatic relationship and the children are going through perhaps a lot of therapy and issues getting over things, you maybe don't want to give them a big pot of money. You're forced to, you have to at 19. You may want to push that down the road. So I think that, when you're going through the divorce, there's a legal part of it, but you really need to start mapping out, like, okay, as we get to the other side of this, where are the kids going to be sitting, right? Both financially, emotionally, where am I going to be sitting, right? And you need to kind of coordinate it that way, because I have seen cases where an trust account was left out of the divorce in terms of settlement money, but it was agreed that one parent would look after it because they had more financial wherewithal. It turned out it wasn't that great of an idea, because essentially when one of the children turned of age, they had to turn it over, and it quickly disappeared.
A quick interruption. Please take a moment to subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as like, comment, and share on the videos. It supports the channel and allows me to be able to produce more content with great guests who provide tremendously valuable expert advice for anyone going through the divorce process.
I think one thing I would highly recommend, accountants are great at their job, lawyers are great at their job. One thing I've seen sometimes is lawyers will get it all set up legally, but won't take into account the investments themselves. And so I would highly recommend it, unless you're prepared to do it yourself. Make sure you have an investment professional that before you kind of settle and what have you, when you start getting an idea what it's going to look like, make some suggestions to you on how best to receive assets. If you receive stuff in a registered account, for example, like an RSP, there's eventual taxation on it versus getting it in a non-registered account. If you get, there's one client right now where she's dealing with somebody who's a majority owner in a private company, and they wanted to give the shares as part of the settlement. Well, how are you going to get liquid on that? And you're beholden to that private company that has no disclosures. It wouldn't really make sense to do something like that, even though dollar figure wise it matches up. And again, I go back to those outcomes is, when you take time to think and reflect, and again, you can do it on your own. You don't need a professional, but I would suggest having a good investment professional give some feedback on that.
This is where, again, coming back to the divorce team is so incredibly important. Your lawyer is there to help you get a settlement within the parameters of British Columbia law or Canadian law. But if you get that agreement and then you go to your professionals, you might find out afterwards that you've made decisions that aren't financially wise. So it's important with investments, but also with your mortgage, finding out where you're going to qualify, how you're going to get to the next place. So, or your accountant in terms of the tax implications of what you're signing. So I think that when it comes to, your separation agreement, it's always important to make sure you're getting all that advice up front. And that's what I'm hearing from you. Is that right?
One big example, here's a perfect one that I've unfortunately had to help work them through it with them. So they ended up getting much more than they expected in a settlement. But what they got was 2 homes, an RSP, and a life insurance policy, and no liquid assets. And so when taxes came due on the properties and things like that, and all the things that come with owning property, And unfortunately, this was during the credit crisis in '08, where there wasn't a lot of homes being sold. They had to rate the RRSP at, high tax rates and the insurance policy at a time that wasn't necessarily the best. And so there was an example where on paper it looked really good, but if you kind of walk through and this was somebody who didn't have any credit, so it wasn't like they could go get a mortgage or line of credit or anything like that. So here's a case where, you absolutely, if they had talked to a financial professional, they would have helped point out those things to them.